and welcome to the Holistic Living, Learning, and Loving podcast, where we are bringing you back to the basics.
We explore sustainable living and holistic health and strive for progress, not perfection.
So please join us on a wellness journey and feel empowered to make positive changes in your life.
Guys, today we are going to talk about CAFOs. CAFO stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation. It's how animals are farmed in mass scale. We're going to get down to the dirty truth, talk about the planet and human effects that it has on us, and hope that we can impart some good ideas for solutions to the problem. So let's get to it. What exactly is a CAFO, Rachel?
So the definition by the U.S. Department of Agriculture is an intensive feeding operation in which over 1,000 animal units are confined for over 45 days a year, with an animal unit being the equivalent of 1,000 pounds of animal weight.
So basically it's just like animals stacked on top of each other, like just completely like no space literally for like even a piece of paper probably.
Yeah, I mean, basically. So like the nasty truth about CAFOs is that a lot of times chicken and pork are packed in these warehouses with no windows, cement floors. They're packed, I want to say shoulder to shoulder, wing to wing. I don't know, but they are packed like sardines, and they're living on their own waste. There's no soil to absorb the waste. I guess in some situations there might be bedding. But they're standing on their own waste. They're eating on their own waste. The smell is horrendous. The air is horrendous. It's just terrible living conditions. Those animals are stressed. They're unhappy. Those animals want to be outside on the soil under the sunlight. This is just completely awful conditions. Beef and dairy cows is a much similar situation, but they're often outside. But similar situations, the food is always brought in. They're not foraging, they're not grazing.
So they basically never see the sun, don't ever eat real grass, or breathe fresh air. Just like the triple horrible threat of every possible bad thing.
Yes. And also a lot of these farmers, they will get in sometimes they'll get in hazmat suits just to go and tend to the animals, which says a lot if your farmer has to put on a hazmat suit to tend to their animals. And we're eating that meat. The FDA or USDA regards that as safe meat.
That's so gross. And I've had people tell me, because I try to always push people, I'm a pusher, to like go to the farmer's market. I'm like all the time. And one of my friends said that, she doesn't know about trusting like where the meat's coming from the farmer's market, and that there's no like guideline to tell them they have to do this or that, to stay like USDA guidelines or whatever. But I just feel like, the USDA guidelines are in place because these CAFOs are so atrocious that they have to have rules in place to protect us in some kind of way. Otherwise, we'd like literally be sick all the time from the meat we have, because it's just full of like bacteria and feces and like pus from these like gaping like wounds that are all over these animals and stuff, and just festering.
Yeah, the USDA, I would not trust anything they say or do. I would not take that as a guideline, as safe food for me to eat ever. Mm-hmm. They lead us down the wrong roads completely. They're not trustworthy whatsoever. So people often think that way because that's how we're supposed to feel. But that's just because they're not educated on how corrupt and just the whole system is. It's corrupt and it's just messed up. They don't understand how to properly fix these situations.
Just look at the FDA and all them, like what they allow in our food that we've been talking about forever, all the toxic stuff in it, all the seed oils, all these bad chemicals and preservatives, seed oils and baby formulas, and the FDA mandates that that's the case. So it's just like, unfortunately, just like another offshoot of that where they just allow this stuff to keep happening because of money.
It's all about money. So they're really not trustworthy. When it comes to your local farmer, you can get to know that farmer. You can ask to walk around the farm, and see their practices, have them tell you about their practices. I mean, a lot of these farmers are pretty honest. I mean, on a small scale, there isn't much to worry about. We hear about all this disease and all of these problems that these big CAFOs are having because their animals are living in terrible conditions. So they are plagued with issues. But local farmers don't have these issues. It's not as hard to keep your animals healthy and well when you're doing it right. And that's what the local farmers are doing. They don't have big $1 million warehouses packed with thousands of animals. They aren't. They're doing it the natural way. And that's where you want to get your meat from. Even if they aren't doing it organically, even if they are feeding their cows grain, it's still better than buying from those CAFOs from the grocery store.
How did CAFOs even start? Like,
So
like, I guess just because we had all these mouths to feed and we're like, I mean, I guess it all just starts from money, right? Or
well,
maybe...
so I brushed up on this morning to make sure I understood. But it wasn't like anything malicious. So farmers always farmed, the natural way. But once we got to like the early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution was starting, or we were in it, and population started to increase. Cities started population started to increase in the cities, and farmers were having to like scale up, needing more animals, but they didn't really have the ability to sustain more animals, right? They didn't have, so fencing and piping were expensive back then. We didn't have plastic. And so all it was metal piping. That was expensive. So the animals had to drink from like rivers, streams, ponds. And that means that you couldn't move that. And they also didn't have fencing, so you couldn't move the animals to fresh pasture or fresh water. So they were pretty stationary, and that's okay with a few animals. But when you start scaling up and you start getting a lot of animals, it's no longer okay, which is the situation with the CAFOs basically, but outside. Even though you're outside, the soil can only take so much waste. The soil was never meant to have a bunch of animals on it for long periods of time. That's why cows and such are grazers, and they move on, same with any animal really. So they didn't have the ability to do that. They also didn't have chainsaws or whatnot to cut down trees and make bedding to absorb all of the waste, because that's what we use. You use wood chips, straw, whatever, to create bedding to absorb the waste and make compost, whatnot. So they were starting to get all kinds of problems with disease. But then antibiotics came along, and that was like, that solved all their problems. So they were like so thankful to have antibiotics. And then the oil and gas boom came, and they had, oil and gas. They were able to take the waste and move it around and whatnot. But, and then in the 1960s, fencing was invented. But by the time all these things were invented that could have allowed them to tend to these animals the proper way, still keep them outside. We can move them now, get them fresh water, get bedding. The CAFO system was already in place, and a quote from Joel Salatin, which I think is a really good one. He says, "When conventional orthodoxy takes over a model, it doesn't look for alternatives, but also do not recognize them when they are presented." So, and that's really true. Like, they were already stuck in their ways. This is already the system. And it's like, once you're doing something for a certain way for so long, people kind of laugh and scoff at anything else. Like, oh no, this is the way it's always been done. You can't do this any other way,
Yeah.
And that's how it became.
Yeah, so this documentary that I watched maybe like 6 months ago or something, they were real hard on CAFOs, and they showed a lot of like disgusting imagery of the CAFOs and, how the animals look and how they're, wounded and nasty and all that stuff. But another thing that they talked about on there was the environmental impact of that. And you kind of touched on it, like the soil can only accumulate so much waste in it. And like basically like the areas that are next to like, so what I was watching is they would take all this, feces and urine and all that stuff from like, let's say a cow farm, or in this case, it was a pig farm. and they, pump it over to like a pond, and then they take it from the pond and they actually put it in sprinklers, and they're sprinkling it
Yeah.
on like the area outside, and it's like literally like next door to like people's houses and stuff. People that had lived there longer than the CAFO, so it's not like they like knew what they were buying into and stuff like that. There's like family, like predominantly like black people and people at the
Oh.
economic disadvantage, that they just like moved in their back door. So they spray like that feces water all over. The people are super sick. Obviously, they have tons of health issues. And then also, I mean, if you like don't care, hey, your problem, whatever. It also gets into the waterways and travels down the Mississippi River. All that nasty water comes down this way, and our water is totally polluted. And that's like basically the water that our drinking water comes from in most places.
Yeah, and this isn't just any feces. Okay, this feces is
This is
filled.
special feces.
Yeah, it's filled with antibiotics, heavy metals, all these medications that they're on, and so much more. It's filled with toxic crap. Not the kind of crap you want in the soil to fertilize your soil with, which when you're buying like I don't want to name any names, but sometimes you can buy cow manure in a bag, and that's all coming from these CAFOs. It's not the
Yeah.
kind you want to put on your garden.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and I think they said that there's like a lot of toxic metals and stuff, I guess, probably from their feed, because it's just like the lowest quality feed you can possibly feed an
Yes.
animal for them to stay alive.
Yeah, and they're a lot of them are being fed grains, and conventional grains are heavily sprayed with Roundup, pesticides, glyphosate, as a desiccant. It's sprayed as an herbicide, but also sprayed as a desiccant right before harvest to dry it out quicker because they're impatient and they want to make more money. So they douse it in Roundup to dry it out faster. And, they're not feeding these animals this, high quality organic grain that hasn't been sprayed. They're feeding them this crap. And that doesn't just disappear once they ate it. It's in their body, it's in their feces, it's in their meat.
Yeah, it's just like bioaccumulating in their organs. And some people are obsessed with eating organs and stuff like that, and that's probably the worst possible thing you can do when you're talking about a CAFO animal.
Yeah, I know. It's really crazy. And then, like you said, this is all going in our water and everything. That's why our waters are just so polluted. And then you have the whole greenhouse gas effect.
Oh yeah, like all the methane and stuff that goes
Yeah.
up, and it's like to blame partially for ruining like our ozone layer and all that stuff.
Yeah.
All those cow farts.
Well, a lot of people get confused thinking that cows are just bad altogether. It's not the animal. That obviously the animals are not bad. It is CAFOs, when you have a bunch of animals and just crowded in one area. It's a combination of all of the bad things.
Yeah, so when I watched that documentary, like the first thing I thought is like we have to give up meat, because it just made meat look so bad, and it was like had so much bacteria in it, and all the pus and like all those issues that they talked about with the CAFOs. And we lasted like about a week until I realized like it's not that we can't have meat, it's that we need to be more careful about the meat that we eat. And that's when I started really going to the farmers market and buying from those people. Now, did I ask them to go on their farm and see what they're doing? No, because it's like you can only have so much perfection. Like what we do is like so stressful. I was just telling Mike about how stressed out I was feeling because I felt like I can't go out to eat anymore because of all the dietary exclusions I have, gluten, dairy, seed oils, and it's very stressful to like think about all this stuff. So it's like we have to be careful not to, like, the stress of that, like you said before, it's just as bad as the stress of eating the
it.
bad stuff,
Yeah.
like eating unhealthily.
It's just as bad as eating the bad food. Yeah. So that's why you gotta tell people, just educate yourself, and just take the simple, once you start to educate yourself, don't do anything. Just learn. Just learn and learn and learn. And then you'll just automatically start making little steps, you know? You don't even have to be intentional about it. You're just going to automatically just start making small steps. And just do the best you can. I mean, look, I don't even buy my meat from local farms yet. I haven't gotten to that point. I'm still going to teach everybody that that's ideal. And that's what I'm moving towards. I'm trying to get to that point. I am planning for it. I'm trying to save for it. You know, it takes time, especially if you're not made of money. So
Yeah, it's expensive.
yeah, but it is possible. So it's like, for example, like when you get your tax return at the beginning of the year, you could go in with friends and family on a part of a cow, you know, invest in meat for your family, because meat is one of the most important things to eat clean. At this point, I'm just buying organic from the store, which is better, but it's not ideal, you know? But yeah, so I'm teaching this, but I'm still not doing it perfectly because it takes time, and I'm a few years into this journey. So don't ever get too stressed on it, because Rome wasn't built in a day, and it takes time to change your whole belief system and your whole way of living that you've always known.
Yeah, it's hard. And, you know, it's like I said, it's very expensive. I mean, so we eat a lot of eggs. We start off every morning with a lot of eggs. And then, you know, with the meat that I get from the farmer's market, because it's so expensive, we just eat less of it. Like before, you know, if I was going to buy chicken to cook dinner with for, you know, the night, and then like maybe the next day leftovers, I'd probably make like 4 or 5 chicken breasts for the 4 of us. But now I like make it work with like maybe 2 to 3, and like we just have more veggies or whatever.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you said that. And it's funny you say that, because I actually had that thought today, that now that I've started this journey, excuse me, now that I've started this journey, we as a family eat less overall, which isn't a bad thing. Like, I think a lot of people think like, oh, you know, the idea of success is like having a cabinet full of food and being able to eat all day. Like, that's not even healthy. First of all, we were never meant to be eating all day. You know, you could eat 1 meal or 2 and that's fine, you know? But yeah, we just eat less. And that's because the food's expensive. I don't buy snacks anymore. If we're gonna have snacks, I make them for the most part. And yeah, it's expensive. So we have to make it last, but we're the healthiest we've ever been. You know,
it's expensive, but also it's hard to eat like this because it's not as desirable. Like, you don't want to just go sit down and gorge on a bunch of carrot sticks. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Right. And you know what? Food was never supposed to be that desirable. Otherwise, we would have always been gluttonous. You know, we're not supposed to be that way. We're not supposed to be addicted to food. Food is supposed to be our fuel to sustain us. And only, you know, we should only want to eat when we absolutely need to eat, or when our body needs it. We're not supposed to be craving it all the time and wanting to eat because we're bored or whatever. That's just because our food has been made so addictive and, you know, full of sugar and everything that's unnatural.
Preservatives, colors, like, things to make it taste better and all that stuff, you know.
Right.
But yeah, so we just do that and try to eat more vegetables. And honestly, that's like what we need to be doing. Like, I mean, I know there's this huge push for protein and all that stuff, but that, like I said, that's why we try to get a lot from our eggs, because those are cheaper. It's still not cheap for eggs, but cheaper. And then try to load up more on vegetables in the dish instead of loading up on meat and having like meat forward. But yeah, like, and you know, it's like, because also, it's not even just about the toxicness of the meat and all that stuff. It's that we are over consuming meat, and, you know, we need to conserve our resources on this planet for future generations. And by mass producing meat is, you know, having this toxic effect on the earth. It's not good for our earth to be mass producing meat the way we are. We have to be a little more careful and understand, like, we don't need to eat like tons of meat all the time.
We don't need to eat tons of anything all the time.
Well, maybe not. I mean, tons of vegetables is probably ideal. I mean, it's not yummy. Well, I don't know. Then you got vegetables with different loads of toxicity. You know, it's like you can't eat anything too much. You have to have moderation in all things.
Yeah. I mean, I believe in listening to your body. Period. You know what I mean? When your body's full, that's all you need. But
So we kind of got off on a tangent here. So yeah,
yeah.
like all these animals are it's so nasty from a respiratory, condition with all the stuff in the air, from a, viral, bacterial on the body and all that. They have to pump them full of antibiotics and vaccines.
Yeah. That's the only way to make a CAFO work is with antibiotics and vaccines and medications. It is that animals cannot live in conditions like that for long periods of time, not on the levels that that they're trying to pump them out at. You would have a lot of loss without antibiotics. But now the FDA is trying to, or it has pushed for there to be no more. They say like no more antibiotic use, but antibiotics are still used when the animals are sick. It's just antibiotic residues upon slaughter. So there should be no antibiotic residues allowed in the meat when they're slaughtered. So they have to I don't know how long the period is, but they have to not stop taking it, I guess, some period beforehand. But apparently that's not good enough because now they are pushing for mRNA vaccines, which is like projecting to be like $1 billion industry. So there's a lot of money behind this, but there's a lot of bad things about the mRNA vaccine. There's a lot of studies on it. We're not really going to get into it, but it can change the way your DNA is expressed. And if the animal has had an mRNA vaccine, they also have studies showing that when we eat the meat, that can also affect our DNA. And they're even going as far as allowing it, they're going to allow it in organic meat, and there's not going to be any special labeling. But an mRNA vaccine is basically they take the pathogen or multiple pathogens, they synthesize it, make a synthetic version of it, and then they, pump it into the animal, and then the animal makes antibodies to it. But there's a whole science behind it. But basically, it's questionable and not ideal. And it's supposed to be replacing antibiotics. So yeah, it's like, yay, like no more antibiotics, which they still are, but I guess not as much. But they're just going to replace it with something else instead of actually fixing the problem. And the problem is the animals are living in unnatural conditions that are not healthy and they can't survive in it. So instead of just fixing that and maybe going to more regenerative agriculture, they just keep trying to put band-aids on the problem because they don't really want to fix the problem, They want to stick to what they know and make their money.
We think that the antibiotics are the big problem right now, but, in 10, 15 years from now, we could realize that the mRNA vaccines is exponentially worse than what we would have ever even gotten from the antibiotic resistance. Yeah. So it's like we just don't know enough about what it is, like what it's going to do to us, in the long term.
Right. And there's just not enough consent out there. Like we're not made aware of all of these things. They just do it, and they don't explain, we don't understand it, and it's just too much. All of this synthetic crap is never good. Everything really just needs to get back to a natural system, the way nature provides. We're always going to have issues the more we try to fight nature.
Mm-hmm. And like we've already gone down this. We started with the CAFOs, and then we had to do the antibiotics, and now we're having to do the vaccines. And it's like the issue is to get away from the CAFOs altogether,
Right.
Like it's just not a good model. It doesn't work.
Right, and it's like they don't want to accept that. But this is how they make their money. They're not interested. It's all about money, so that's all they care about.
Mm-hmm.
But besides how the mRNA vaccine can change the way your DNA is expressed, I really wanted to bring up some epigenetics. I don't know if everybody has heard about epigenetics at this point. If you haven't, I highly, highly encourage you to go look into it. It changes everything about what we used to know from science or as science. And it just changes everything. And it explains everything about why we're dealing with so much disease and illness today, especially at younger and younger ages. And when you're when you have these animals in the CAFOs and they're under a lot of stress, producing a ton of cortisol, they're unhappy, they're full of disease and illness or hormones, all of this terrible stuff they're being pumped with, that's information. And in the past, science didn't believe that our DNA could communicate with the DNA of plants and animals. But now we know through epigenetics that it can. And so every time we eat a vegetable or meat, that is information that our body is reading and then decides how it's going to use that information to express our DNA. And that goes back to how I said we don't have faulty DNA. We're all predisposed to certain cancers and certain diseases and illnesses, and it's always been that way. But when we eat certain things or we're exposed to certain things in our environment and our DNA reads this information, this toxic information, right? Mm-hmm. It causes our DNA to express those bad things that we are predisposed to. So we really have to be careful of what information we're eating. And when you buy a pack of ground beef from the store, conventional ground beef, that could be meat from 100 different cows in there. It's always meat from more than one cow. It's not just one cow. So you're eating so much different information from different DNAs and from other parts of the world, because that's why they say to eat local, because that's information. You want to eat local because that's the information that you're living within, the information that your body understands best, right? That's what's going to allow you to live in the most healthful condition. If we're eating meat from a cow from China who's in a different season than us, different soil than us, different, everything from us, we're eating that information and confusing our body and causing chaos. And as woo-woo as that might sound, it's very real, and you should look into it.
Yeah, and it's just like, cancer, we always have cancer cells freely floating around in our bodies, and it just depends on our body's ability to fight those off and how our DNA is expressed, and those things that either will make a cancer turn, into, a malignant tumor or something like that, or just get destroyed and, go away, which
right.
is, the ideal situation. So the stuff that we eat and consume and, everything that our body consumes from air, water, light, food, all these things is telling our body how to operate, and will either send us into, hopefully, into good health or bad health, So
That's
we
exactly
don't
right.
want to, in some things, you just can't even help at all. So it's like,
Right.
for what you can help, you should try, because,
Yes.
it could mean the difference in getting cancer or not, or whatever, getting Hashimoto's, or all these different things that people are afflicted with these days,
Right, because we're plagued by so many different toxins and so much bad information being, introduced to our bodies, that we have to counteract it where we can with good information. Like you said, because we can't fight it all, but it is possible. There are people out here living healthy, thriving lives by making these changes, and they're not living perfectly, right? Because we're all still breathing this air, and there's nothing we can do about it, or whatever,
No, and you just can't let yourself get consumed with that, but you should try to make better decisions going forward if you are able to, just start going to the farmer's market when it's available in your city. That's my number one thing. Just start going there, and maybe just buy one thing from there when you go, and maybe you'll see, oh, look, they sell strawberries and it's actually a better price than at the store, and you might just start to slowly build your household groceries from the farmer's market instead, and meet some cool people too.
It's all
and there's
about
always
building
different stuff.
Yeah, it's all about building new habits, and it takes a little time. Like the way I live now, which I always say it's been about 2 years now, it's all habit now. A lot of the things that were very difficult at first, which is an age-old thing, it gets easier with time. So many things were I was how could I ever do this on a daily basis? This is so much to think about. This is so much to do. But now it's just how I live. it's a habit now. And so do my kids and my husband. We all have adapted to this lifestyle, and we do have so many more changes we want to make, but it's going to take time. But you just take these small steps, like you said, go to the farmer's market and buy what you can, and before you know it, you might end up be making most of your food from that because you've gotten used to it, and it just became habit over time, and you took those small steps, and it just becomes easier. So it's just going to add up over time. You're not going to make all that change overnight, but a few years later, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, wow, like I've made so many huge changes that were so hard to make, and now they're simple to me.
I'm all about farmers market. I just went to two farms really today. We picked blueberries at one farm because I'm cleaning those, and sorry, I'm like fidgeting in case anybody's wondering what's going on down here.
I know, I was fidgeting with my pencil. We're not the kind to sit still during a podcast.
No, I'm like always like moving. Like
me too.
Some people like we were talking about, like we watch podcasts and they're just like sitting for like a whole hour, like they never moved, and I'm like all over the place.
I know. Oh well.
So we went to a blueberry picking farm this morning. I like to clean them when I get home and then freeze them in like gallon-sized Ziploc bags because the girls love frozen blueberries.
Yes, too.
And then we went to a different farm in Mississippi and picked up a couple bushels of purple hull peas, which are like my favorite. And so we have to shuck those tonight, and that's going to be a lot of work, but trying to, stockpile that stuff so that we have it and I don't have to buy conventional black eyed peas from Whole Foods all the time.
Yeah. And you know what? You can make little traditions around these things that become special and make it not so much work. Like, shucking the blue hull peas, you could all sit together as a family while watching a movie and do it. Or, sit outside and play trivia while you're shucking the peas. Or, just whatever you may come up with. But you could just make little traditions around it.
Yeah, you're right.
For
and
me,
it's like every year, it's like purple hull pea time. We're going to have our tradition.
Yeah. For me, it's not so great, but because I don't really have time, I grow field peas and we really love them. I just keep them in a bag, and during the week the kids aren't allowed to be on electronics, not even TV, until 4. So I tell them if they're gonna shuck peas, they can watch TV.
Bribes.
And they do. So it gets done and everybody's
so
happy.
That is hysterical. Bribes.
Yeah. So that's one way.
So, I mean, I haven't gone to my farmer and asked, what feed he's feeding the cows and, all that stuff. I don't quite want to get into that. That's it's already hard enough, and I'm not going to go down that path. Maybe 5 years from now, Heather might be getting involved in the weeds. But for now, I think it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, just buying from your local farmer is, I promise you, 1,000,000 times better than buying anything at the grocery store. I promise. So, just like you said, you're not ready for that. It's going to stress you out too much. So don't do it. You're taking a better step, and that's what matters, Yeah,
and I also heard that, they inject or put coloring and stuff in the meat to make it look better at the grocery store.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
So it's they want it to look redder, so they'll inject it with that to make it look better.
Oh, they do all kinds of things. But another thing that people always say is that CAFOs are necessary to feed the world, which at this point, until people, or the big players decide to change their minds about it, I guess it will be, but it's not necessary, and it's definitely possible to feed the world through regenerative agriculture. It's just going to take more manpower, it's going to be more human based, labor wise, and more small farms and more people involved, rather than heavy equipment and big facilities and all of that. But Joel Salatin talks a lot on that, and if anybody would want to know how that's possible, he's the man you want to listen to. But it's certainly possible, and the thought of it, I think, is really beautiful, and it makes me sad that we aren't there. But CAFOs are certainly not necessary to feed the world. And that's just like the lie they keep telling people because that's what they want to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like it's control. I mean, they're controlling all the meat we eat basically, and um, pumping us full of toxins and all this stuff. And you know, it's
Yeah.
really sad that that's like what it's come to. But I definitely recommend maybe watching a documentary about it to like see,
Yeah.
and get inspired to maybe want to make a change because it is pretty horrendous.
It is. And it's only like, it's not that many companies that are actually running all of this. It's, you have Tyson, Smithfield, and some others. I'm not well versed in it, but it's a lot of very big, major companies providing almost all of our meat.
hmm
But yeah, the answer to it is definitely regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, and like,
Or regenerative farming.
and then it's like another thing about the farmers market because I'm obsessed with the farmers market, obviously.
And you
Is
should be.
like it's not only about the quality of the food, about the locality of the food being close to you. It's also about supporting local communities, supporting
Yes.
our local farmer, keeping our money in our own community. Because the last person that needs our money is Tyson and all these mega corporations and Elon Musk and all that stuff. Like we should be supporting each other and supporting our farmers that are taking the time to grow us food that is actually nutritious and
Right.
not full of chemicals.
That's who we want to be supporting. We want to support them so that they can grow and thrive and continue to provide us with this healthful food, and then it's also voting with our dollars, showing these big corporations what we really want, what we really demand of our food, and where we're going to put our money if they can't provide it. And you always want to keep your money in your own community.
Yeah, and it's like maybe the community probably, I mean, obviously the farmers market cannot possibly feed everybody in like our community.
Unless we would change the way we think and start creating more farmers and more farmers markets, It's possible. It's just our system doesn't work with that right now.
Yeah,
But
it's
I'm
kind of
sorry.
like gone to like huge like mega conglomerations instead of people. But it would be possible for those people to get away from CAFOs and do it the right way. I mean, like there's tons, I think isn't it like Bill Gates like owns like most of the land in the United States now?
Something like that. And
He
China.
could put some cows on it.
I don't want anything from Bill Gates. They're already owning farmland and doing all kinds of things with our food. I don't want anything that comes from him because it's not going to be well.
Yep. So it's complicated, but we kind of talked about the cost and buying. You can buy parts of a cow, you can buy a whole cow, half a cow, quarter of a cow, go in with a friend. That's great. You can store it in your deep freezer, and the price. I think the price, if you buy that quantity, it's more in line with what you will pay at the
Yeah.
grocery store for sure. Now,
Yeah.
when you just go like one off and get like a pound of ground meat from the farmer's market, that's like
what's
when it's like
expensive.
way more expensive. But that's definitely a good way. Buying whole chickens instead of cut up chickens. Although, I don't know, man, whole chickens are freaking expensive.
Yeah, it's just going to be cheaper than buying it cut up, I would imagine.
I don't know,
That's what it's
man. Like,
supposed to be anyway.
I hate to say that the farmer's market whole chicken for a very small chicken is like $30.
And see, it's because it costs so much to raise them, truthfully. The reason these CAFOs can provide us with such cheap meat and food is because of the system. They're also always being bailed out with subsidies from the government. Like, really, our food is, from what I read, our food is being sold to us cheaper than what it costed to grow it or make it or farm it, because of government subsidies, which is just not a sustainable system.
Yeah.
So it's really something we have to get away from regardless. We have to just change the way we think about food. I know that is really expensive, and maybe we'd have to eat less chicken. I don't really know the
I just
answer.
buy less chicken, buy less meat.
Yeah.
Try to switch it to eating, okay, I'm going to put these carrots in the stew and bulk it up with other things besides meat.
Yeah.
So
And getting the most out of it, like making bone broths with the carcasses and things like that to get the most nutrients out of it. So one last point to make about the whole CAFO thing is, often the cows, the beef cows in these operations are fed grain, which that's what we've become used to. A lot of people are like, oh, grass-fed beef tastes gross, whatever. That's what beef was always supposed to taste like. The only reason we think grain-fed beef is better is because it's what we've always eaten and it's what we've always known. But cows were never supposed to live off of grain. They're grazers, they're ruminants, and they live off of pasture and grass. And anytime you feed an animal or a human something that's not natural to them, it's not going to be the most nutritious and healthy food. And then also, like we said, they're being fed grains that are probably heavily sprayed with herbicides. And then it increases our grain intake, which as humans, we're already consuming way more grains than we were ever supposed to. The food pyramid really lied to us and led us astray with that one, with the whole 6 to 11 servings of grain a day, biggest lie ever. The only way to really consume grains on that level would mean we would have always had to be cultivating fields and fields and fields of grain, right? I mean, it takes that to consume grains the way we consume them. And that's not natural. It's not normal. And that's what's caused us all to be so bloated and overweight and so many health issues. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. A lot of people are trying to stay away from grains, but then we eat grain-fed beef. That means we're consuming the grains they consumed and whatnot. But and then also if what?
well, I guess I said you are what you eat, but
No, I mean you are what you eat. But I mean, I guess you're not a grain.
I'm not a grain.
But you have the chemical components of it or whatever. I don't know.
It's expressing my DNA into a stalk of wheat.
But yeah, so also if you're buying grass-fed beef from the grocery store, it doesn't always mean that that cow ate grass its entire life. It just means, unless it says grass-fed, grass-finished, it probably only ate grass very little. It has to be grass-fed, grass-finished. That's just a little wordplay that they allow on the labeling. It's always a bunch of wordplay and trickery on the labeling. But
and grass-fed's going to taste different than grain-fed beef, and a lot of people don't like the way grass-fed beef tastes because again, our taste buds are hijacked into wanting this artificial food that we love, and that's no different. So you also have to change your thinking about what it should taste like because it's not going to be the same.
Right. I mean, I personally don't find it that different. I do taste the difference, but my husband complained and complained and complained, but I did not give in, and he doesn't complain anymore. And we've gotten used to it, You just got to get over it. If you can't get over it, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. It's got to be a priority in your life.
Yep, you got to start making the little changes to get a little better. So, yeah, definitely try to do organic meat, try to do grass-fed and finished beef. Be careful about that. I don't even know, like, as far as eggs, like, I've heard that, like, there's all these different things on the egg cartons about how the chickens were raised, but I don't know. I feel like it's all just BS, and it's all
a lot
like,
of it is.
Yeah, they're like out, like if you look at like Whole Foods, it's like allowed out, like outdoor access. It's like, what does that mean?
Oh, let me explain that really quick. So that's a little wordplay for organic. Recently, it was supposed to be like a big win for the organic label that they were going to make outdoor access available to the birds. Okay, so the way it works is the birds they have to stay inside for like the first so many days of their life. Like I wanted to say it was like 20 something days. It's a while. Okay, so these birds are getting used to just being inside first of all. And then all of a sudden these little doggy doors opened up. It's just little doggy doors. And then typically right outside of the doggy door, a good ways they're allowed to have cement or gravel. Chickens don't like cement or gravel. it hurts their feet. They like to scratch, you know. So they're already used to being indoors. That's what they've always known at this point. And then if they do try to walk out, it's like this environment that's unnatural to them. They don't even like it, so they don't even want to go outside to begin with. So it's basically just there's a little more to it. I can't remember all of it, but basically it's just to appease the label, you know, just to say, oh, they do have outdoor access, but they don't use it, and it's not correct.
That's
you know,
crazy. Yeah, so I just like to get my eggs from a farmer's market or some like I've you know, on Facebook you can find
Yeah.
local like homesteaders and stuff like that. And so I
So
usually
many
follow
people are
those pages and see what's going on.
so many people have chickens these days that you should be
I
able to
know.
find some yard eggs pretty easily.
Yeah, and I think that that's way better than buying stuff from the store.
For
Even though
sure.
it's like, am I going to get on the weeds of what they're feeding their chickens? No, I'm not.
Right.
I
I
actually
mean,
asked
that's
one lady what she fed them, and I like Googled it, and it, you know, it was like grain stuff and like seed oils and stuff. And I was like, Heather, don't even go down this rabbit hole. Like, you literally won't be able to eat anything.
yeah, I know. I mean,
Or like
all
you feel like you have to grow and produce everything yourself, which is also unsustainable.
that's where I started with my whole homesteading thing. Is once I started to learn this, I was like, I came to the conclusion that the only way to really have safe food was to grow it all myself. And so I started to try to learn how to garden and got chickens, and now I want to farm, and I will try to grow a lot of my food myself. But that's because I really
Good
enjoy
luck.
it. I
I'm
want
over
to.
it. Right, so let's stop supporting all these mega conglomerations of horrible, horrible animal practices, horrible slaughtering and, you know, packaging, all these nasty, horrible practices. Let's stop supporting that. Support our local farmers if you can. Try to buy organic when you can. Keep our money in our own communities. Go to the farmers market. Figure out when your local farmers market is. It's a lot of them are on Saturday mornings. Get there early because that's when the best stuff is. It's not wiped out. And let's try to revolutionize the way that we eat and take back our power, our own bodies, our mental health, our physical health. Let's take all that stuff back. So I hope
Yes.
I see someone at the farmers market this weekend because it's my jam. I will be in the Covington Farmers Market doing my thing. So thanks everybody. See you next week. We release podcasts every Friday. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let's get a dialogue going. How do you solve these problems in your household? We'd love to hear from you guys.
Yes, please communicate with us.
All right. Bye guys.
Bye.